Before we begin this podcast, please be advised that the following episode contains language that some listeners may find offensive and inappropriate. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast producers. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the second installment of Joseph Johnson's story. Last time, Joseph revisited his life under the roof of his strict and distant grandparents. Desperately looking for an escape from their control, Joseph began plotting the murder for which he's in jail today. Now, Joseph breaks down the day that irreversibly changed his life on this episode of Voices of a Killer.
So tell me about this time getting a little bit closer to the day that this is going to happen. Did you start planning it, or was there something that they did that set you off?
I get asked about a trigger event so often, and I can honestly say there really wasn't one. There was 3 days where I took, and I had considered the possibility of suicide at that time, and that was just kind of repugnant to me, so I just kind of moved forward when I stopped having self-doubts.
Yeah. And before you carry on to tell me what exactly happened, did you have any kind of thoughts to listen, in a few more years, I'm going to be old enough to where I can go do my own thing. I have to put up with this for a little while longer, and I'll have my freedom. And also, if I do this, I'm facing, you watch the news, you see these people do things like this, and they go to prison. So where were you at in your head?
I had actually not had access to TV, only internet for a lot, and true crime wasn't really a thing I was into, so I didn't have that reference readily. And also that I was basically their sole beneficiary in a trust because they had flat out told me they didn't want the rest of their children to have it.
Yeah.
But it was conditional on me doing certain things in life. So even if they had died right then and there, my financial security was staked in doing what they wanted me to do.
Right. What was the, you said the guns were the number one idea?
Yeah. Actually, if I can just go right into what happened, if that's agreeable to you.
Yeah, I may stop you if I need a little more detail, but go ahead.
Okay. What had happened was I had basically said I couldn't handle the idea of that freedom being dangled in front of me anymore, so I went and grabbed 2 guns. Both were like little miniature 9mm that were kept in desk stands.
Let me stop you right there. Whenever you decide to do this, did they just tell you, hey, you can't do something, or it was just, were you even interacting with them just before that?
I wasn't, actually.
And where were they whenever you started to go get all this stuff?
They were sitting in the living room, and it was a living room kitchen combo, so it was like all open, like a straight line.
Okay.
Through the house.
So continue, you're going to get what now?
These 2 9mm guns.
Okay.
I had walked into the kitchen, and neither one of them were turned away from me. And I had, for the sake of my own closure, I had told them that I loved them one last time. And I don't know whether that could be said to be accurate, but...
So hold on. Yeah. You walked into this kitchen, and they were right there looking at you you were holding the guns?
No. They were focused on their own activities.
But you actually announced that you loved them?
I did, and deconstructing that later, I honestly think that was more of my way of, showing at least some gratitude for the fact that they had raised me and sheltered me. And
yeah, you grabbed 2 9mm. Did you have both of them in your hand, 2 different guns?
Yes, I did. I had walked into the kitchen with a suit jacket on, and they were in each pocket, and I had pulled them out at the same time.
Why did you put a suit jacket on, just to be able to hold them?
That was actually kind of what I usually wore. We were very this is our household.
Were you, okay, so a suit jacket, that was your household. Are you saying y'all were really wealthy?
We were upper middle class. It was more wealth through being frugal as opposed to...
Sure.
Rich.
Well, either way, it's still money. So did your grandparents are very, uppity and stuff like that with money, or what?
They were savvy in investing.
Did they require you to dress a certain way all the time?
Definitely. There was a definite code of, behavior and politeness and things like that.
Yeah.
I know which fork is the salad fork, basically.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So how does that affect you in prison, being such, because I know where you're probably seeing a lot of complete opposite of how you grew up, people that lived on the fringes,
I've always been called a fast learner, and over time, I've grown to get used to it. I found that I guess you call it the gifts of gab.
So you've adapted.
Oh, yes.
So the last part you left off, you walked in the kitchen and you actually told them that you loved them, and they were kind of to their own devices doing things. They didn't really acknowledge that, did they, whenever you said that?
No, they did not.
Is that whenever you pulled out the guns?
Yes.
Tell me what happened.
Well, there was obviously, they didn't see me, but I had pulled the trigger, and
So who did you point at first?
I pointed at both of them simultaneously.
Okay, so both you double-fisted the 9mm, and were they next to each other on the couch, or lazy boys, or what?
To set the scene, my grandfather was directly in front of me in a recliner faced away, and my grandmother was facing to the side in a leather couch, and I had pulled the guns out, so I was kind of holding them in an L.
Did either one of them see you holding that gun up to them?
No, they did not.
Now, most people that know pistols, they're not all that easy to hit your mark, and holding two of them and trying to hit both of them at the same time. Were you successful at the first shot getting both of them?
Well, I guess you'd say 3/4 successful, and I'll explain why. My grandfather had many guns, as I said, and as such, I had been taught how to shoot, so I had struck her.
How close were you to her?
10, 15 feet away.
Okay, you're still a little ways away, and you still were able to hit her in the temple?
Yeah.
Okay.
But him, I only struck in the spine. And there was a moment where he started to get up in surprise, but I'm guessing some type of spinal fluid leaked or something happened.
Where did you say you hit him?
I assumed it was in the spine because he had started to get up, but he fell back paralyzed, and he wasn't able to move or utter any words after that. But
So before you move any further, the point before you shoot, your grandparents are alive. Once you pull that trigger, death is imminent. How do you feel at that point? Are you still like exactly where you want to be, or is that a reality shot to you? Wow, I really just laid over my grandparents.
I'm unashamed to say that in that exact moment, so much happened that I literally, after both shots had rung out, I remember dropping the guns, and there was the vivid smell of gunpowder. And it's one of those things that stays with you. And on a spiritual level, I sincerely believe to this day, I felt life go out of that room. It was kind of like when you cut a phone call off or something. There's just that absence you feel.
You felt the silence. Did they both pass away right away?
Yeah, but it was also a weight being lifted off in a very eerie sort of way.
So you almost felt like you just disconnected all the stress in your life?
Yeah, I definitely would say that.
Joseph recalls the killing with chilling clarity. There wasn't a single trigger event. No argument took place to set Joseph's plan in motion. Rather, it was the product of years of neglect and isolation, with Joseph convinced that this was his only way out. With a clear sense of resolve, Joseph collected his grandfather's two 9mm pistols, concealed them in his pockets, and walked into the open-plan living room where his grandparents sat, engrossed in their own activities. For the last time, Joseph told his grandparents he loved them. Then he raised the pistols and shot simultaneously. The first shot hit his grandmother in the temple, killing her instantly. The second paralyzed his grandfather, hitting him in the spine. Minutes after the bullets rang out, Joseph vividly recalls feeling that his grandparents' spirits had left the room. In the eerie silence that followed, the smoky smell of gunpowder wafted through the room, and a weight seemed to lift itself off Joseph's shoulders. The years of repression under his grandparents had come to an end, leaving Joseph to confront the grim reality of what he'd done. However, the deed wasn't fully complete. With his grandfather sitting paralyzed, Joseph had more bullets left to shoot, and the worst act was yet to come. After the break, we hear Joseph's next moves.
So how long after you shot him did you just sit there and contemplate things and look at them, look at him dead?
Well, there's more to the story of the shooting because, like as I said, my grandfather, though paralyzed, was still alive.
Okay.
I'm afraid it got more gruesome
Yeah.
here on out.
That's okay. Go ahead.
So, realizing he was still alive, I had, for some reason, decided to turn the gun downward and shoot him from the top of his skull down. And this is, in a gruesome way, even a lot of people in prison don't seem to be aware of, is if you shoot someone straight from the head down, apparently there's like a pressure buildup. So I had a lot of, to use a less gory term, gray matter, gushing forth, and still he seemed to be alive. And so at this point
You had his stuff was gushing out of his head?
Yes, and at this point there are these moments where you know you're being traumatized.
Sure.
So at this point I had grabbed a belt, I had cinched it around his neck, and I left to go outside.
So let me ask you, how many times altogether did you shoot your grandfather?
Twice.
So that second shot was in the head, and he still was fighting for life. Did he look at you and give you a look like why or anything like that?
No. I honestly don't even think he could move his eyes at that point, but I could still hear breathing, and there was like enough to make me believe he was still alive.
Did that freak you out?
Like I said, and like I've told many people, there are these moments where you know you're being traumatized, and that after that point, I think I had gone into a state of shock.
And so you went grabbed a belt, or you took your belt off, or you went found one and put it around his neck and cinched it?
Yeah, I had found one from my room, cinched it, and I had gone outside.
And this entire time, your grandmother's just laid over dead?
Yes.
So you went outside after you cinched it. What did you do outside? How long did you stay out there?
I talk about this moment a lot because it's really deep for me, is that what snapped me out of the shock was the sound of birds singing. And I had realized that not only were birds singing, squirrels and fucking...
Life was going on.
Life went on, and it really not only struck for me that life doesn't have a soundtrack. I guess you could say that it's not... The world doesn't stop for anyone, and not only did it emphasize their mortality, but it taught me my own, and that horrified me in a new way that I had to learn to accept for years on.
It's almost like I can see you going outside and everything's like perfectly normal. Life is going on with the birds and the squirrels. And how long did you sit out there contemplating?
I had fallen down to my knees, honestly, and I was listening, and I was angry and I was shocked, but I was in a stunned, slack-jawed silence, just kind of looking around. I can only imagine how I looked, but probably for a good 10 minutes till I started going back on autopilot.
And where'd you go after your 10 minutes?
Had gone to the cars. I had thrown together what money and credit cards I could find, and I had left. Did
you go back and make sure that they were both passed away?
I could say I did, but no, not really.
So you talk about, you've said this several times, that you mention things. Do you talk about it a lot in prison?
Yeah, I find that I've run across a lot of people that don't want to talk about their own things, and I find that opening up myself helps open up those conversations, and I've been able to help some people work through it, or even if just to give a good story, me telling the story helps me put things in perspective, and each time I tell it, I learn something new.
Now, years later, looking back, do you feel like what you did was justified, or do you think that you could have went about it a different way, or how do you feel now?
I think for someone in my position who had very little of societal things, like being isolated as I was, it was about as justified as you could get, being that isolated and without any frame of reference. Obviously, in our bigger culture and knowledge, I don't think it's justified. There were so many easier solutions.
And that's what I was going to tell you is I can understand the anger, and I bet there's a lot of people, if you laid out your life for them, detail for detail, they could all agree that, wow, that's a lot of pressure for somebody, and not loved, because you weren't loved also. Not just the pressure, but also no positive reinforcement whatsoever. But also you're at an age where you're literally months away from where you can say, hey, man, deuces up, I'm out, and just be done with them. So, yeah, that's your shoes, and I'm talking from my shoes, and I didn't live that life. And I could tell by talking to you, you're not some kind of like crazy person, man. You sound extremely normal, and you just sound like somebody that probably was not loved. You know what I mean?
Nearly 10 years after these murders, it's clear that Joseph has often revisited the events of that day. With years of maturity behind him and an expanded adult mind, Joseph regrets making the irreversible decision to kill. He acknowledges that there were many other options available to him to escape the situation he was in. Unfortunately, as a teenager, his twisted sense of righteousness made him believe his grandparents deserved to die. In a particularly poignant moment, Joseph recalls stepping outside his grandparents' home. In the backyard, birds sang and life spun around him, in stark juxtaposition to the gory crime scene where his grandparents' bodies lay, their blood still fresh. It struck Joseph that the world continued on, indifferent to his actions. The banality of the moment brought Joseph a sudden awareness of his own mortality, something that would profoundly change Joseph's thinking and haunt him in the years to come. In stunned silence, Joseph processed the enormity of his actions. Then, his brain kicked into autopilot. With 2 still warm bodies and a holiday weekend coming up, time ticked on, and it wouldn't take long for the crime to be discovered. Acting in a mechanical way, Joseph replaced the pistols in their cases, collected credit cards, and switched the license plate of his grandparents' car. He then tacked a note to the front door of the house, telling visitors his grandparents were away on a 2-week trip to Texas and to leave any packages by the front door. Having bought himself some time, Joseph now prepared to leave this home that had held a great deal of pain for him. However, Joseph's attempt to run away was poorly planned. With no clear plans other than to disappear somewhere into the arteries of Midwestern roads and survive as a fugitive, Joseph's freedom would be short-lived. We'll hear more about Joseph's time on the run on the next episode of Voices of a Killer.
If you want to find out what happens next, right now, you can sign up at patreon.com/voicesofakiller. There you can find bonus content, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community. So go to patreon.com/voicesofakiller to sign up now. Your support is what keeps us passionate about bringing these stories to you. That's a wrap on this episode of Voices of a Killer. A big shout out to Sonic Futures, who handled the production, audio editing, music licensing, and promotion of this podcast. If you want to hear more episodes like this one, make sure to visit our website at voicesofakiller.com. There you can find previous episodes, transcripts, and additional information about the podcast. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach new listeners. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to share more stories with you in the future. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Toby, and we'll see you next time on Voices of a Killer.